So, welcome to the midlife crisis. What is the midlife crisis? What are we doing? What am I doing? When I was growing up, I used to hear about midlife crises, and it was always earmarked by some guy in his 40s or 50s who, just bought a Corvette or a motorcycle or something of that nature, and he just got a young girlfriend, and he starts to dress different. He might get a tattoo or something like that. Oh, that's pretty. Just a dude that according to everybody surrounding him was just doing some wild shit, and everybody would just shake their head and be like, he must be going through a midlife crisis. This is the guy that blows up his marriage and quote unquote walks out on his family, and everybody would again shake their head and he must be going through a midlife crisis. And for whatever reason, growing up, that term always stuck with me. Didn't really have to worry about it, didn't really pay that much attention to it because I wasn't in the middle of my life, so to speak. But as I got older, it started to ring true to me more and more and more. I'm not the typical 40-something. Some would say I don't look it. Most would say I don't act like it. And that's not from a point of immaturity. It's just that I'm not the crackety old man that wants to sit down with his warm blanket and watch Matlock. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm also not in the club and trying to be outside and all that nonsense, because that's just not me. I walk to the beat of my own drum, but it's just not it's not what somebody would say is typical of somebody in their middle age. So it made me think. It made me think a lot. It made me think that why is it that men in their 40s, maybe people in their 40s, but I'm speaking of men in their 40s, 50s, why do they go through these, what the masses call crises? What is this crisis that we all go through? But I can say from personal experience that when you get to this age, your 20s, you're invincible. You can do whatever. You can wake up without stretching. You can go off of 3 hours of sleep. Excuse me. You can go off for 3 hours of sleep and function for the next 48 hours like nothing happened. You could run marathons without training for them. You can do all the types of stuff in your 20s, and you don't even really realize it. You don't appreciate it because you're just in your 20s. In your 30s, you look back on your 20s like, yeah, I did that. But basically it's like an extension of your 20s or whatever. Your money gets a little better, hopefully. You start being a bit more responsible, hopefully. A lot of us start to, start our families and serious relationships around that point. So life is still pretty much in that honeymoon phase. When you get to your late 30s, early 40s, you start to realize some things. And I'm talking about, my circle of friends and what they start to realize, and myself and what I started to realize. And you start to understand, as I said on a previous recording, that Santa Claus doesn't exist. Nobody's coming. Like, a lot of the things that they tell you to do and to focus on in the earlier part of your life, when you get to your late 30s, early 40s, you start to see that they probably weren't giving me the answers to the test. They probably weren't telling me everything. And you start to realize that, no offense to anybody who's, very religious, you can pray as much as you want. Prayer by itself isn't going to do everything. You can hope that your supervisor is going to see all of the great work that you've been doing and how dedicated you are to the company. And you realize, depending on the supervisor, that may or may not happen. And in my experience, I'd say it's about 70-30 that it's not going to happen. You might come across one of those good supervisors, but, you that's not going to happen. you realize that your money, like I said, looks a little different. And the things that you may have always wanted in your 20s, like, ooh, I've always wanted that Corvette. I've always wanted that sports car. I've always wanted that motorcycle. I've always wanted that tattoo. You look at your bank account, you think to yourself, I can do that now. I can do that without having to worry about eating ramen for the rest of the week. I can do that without having to worry about paying my rent or my mortgage. I can do that. You look at your relationships and you realize, for certain people, hey, I've been settling. Hey, there's something else out there. Hey, that young lady that I've been looking at, or that type of young lady that I've been looking at for however long, is actually interested in me. I'm actually at a point in my life where I can get the young lady that I want. I don't want the tired, rundown person who's been beaten up by life. I want the person who's young and vibrant, because that's what I want. That's what I want to be. That's how I want to feel. I don't want to feel like the drudgery of the everyday. I want to get these things, and you realize that you can get them. I think from the inside looking out, as opposed to the outside looking in, the midlife crisis is men realizing that the life that they've been living isn't necessarily the life that they want. And I think for a lot of us, if not all of us, you start to realize that if I want this particular life, if I want this particular way of living, I have to go out and get it. I have to go out and do this. It's up to me. It's not up to anybody else. Like I said, nobody's coming. I can pray as much as I want, but prayer is not necessarily going to get me the Corvette. I'm going to have to go to the dealership. I'm going to have to save up enough money. I'm going to have to budget properly, and that's how I'm going to get the Corvette. Don't get me wrong. It's all a part of God. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I do believe that God exists. So yes, I do believe that prayer has a part to play in all of this. I can go into it deeper at another time, but I think praying for material things, because material things have been created by man, is not something that you ask God for. That's why everybody's not a millionaire. You can pray to be a millionaire all you want, but that's not of God. God didn't make money. God didn't make, jobs and things like that. God made you. We made money. We made jobs. So if you want to be a millionaire, you got to figure out how to play the game that we created. And again, that speaks to the midlife crisis. It's that reality. Like, I'm not going to get rich by getting up and going to work every single day. But what I can do is get up, go to work every single day, really budget my money to the point where that excess cash that I might want to spend on a date in my 20s, or maybe some flashy clothes or a flashy car in my 30s, now I can put that in investments in my 40s to have those grow, to create another source of income, so that all that frivolous stuff that I was using my paycheck for, now I'm not using my paycheck for anymore. I'm using interest for it. I'm using the dividends that I've earned on my various investments to fund that fun type of lifestyle. It's work that I have to do. If I want to be able to walk around without a cane, to be able to still look like a presentable version of myself, as opposed to having a pot belly and balding spots and things like that, I gotta work. I gotta get up. I gotta do crunches. I gotta do push-ups. I gotta do some cardio. I gotta make sure that these things happen. So to me, that's what the midlife crisis is. I'm living it and I'm exploring it at the same time I'm explaining it, because I don't think it's a crisis in the typical sense of the word. I don't think that it's this negative point that men get to where it's like, oh my God, I'm acting out. I'm going against all societal norms because I'm just not happy with myself, and I have to lash out in some way. I have to do something that's so out of character that people around me are now concerned and are saying that I'm going through a midlife crisis. No, I think the midlife crisis is just the realization that my life isn't where I want it to be, and I'm the one that needs to change it. And that if I really look and analyze what I have and what's in my possession and what I'm capable of, a lot of these things that I don't have, I can have. I can go and change this. I can make these things happen. I don't want somebody who's my age, if they don't look like or represent what I want them to look like, act like, or represent. I need to go out and get somebody better. And I don't think this is just, what am I saying? I don't think that this is only men that do this. I think any woman in her 40s would, if you could compare a man in his 20s or, late 20s, early 30s to a man in his early 40s and 50s, yeah, you get different benefit packages with each. You get an older man, like I said, his finances are probably in line. He's probably got his own place and a couple of businesses and things like that. But he's not into this, that youthful, running around, ripping and running. Hey, I'm gonna try to bang your brains out, for 5 hours every night, versus that 20-year-old who's got nothing but that energy. It's like, yep, this is what I'm doing. I may not have my finances and everything straight, but I can tell you this, you will not be walking after we get finished. I think a lot of women at this point, especially in today's time, are looking at it like, why would I want the old fuddy-duddy when I can get this young thunder pony? I think men, even though we get vilified for doing it or whatever, we're in the same boat. Like, I don't want the old soccer mom that's wearing mom jeans and a muumuu and it's I'm just doing it because it's comfortable. Like, we don't want that. We want something or someone that is willing to still put an effort into themselves, who might still be going to the gym, who actually not even might, who's still going to the gym, who's still making sure, even if you're not in the gym, I'm taking a walk, I'm watching my diet. Like, I'm not using the fact that I have children as an excuse. I'm using them as motivation. Like, I need to be here for a couple of years, so I need to make sure that my health is on point. I need to make sure I can still run around and, take them to school events and dances and things like that. I still want to be alive and jumping around and things like that. As a man, I feel the same way, and I think most men feel that way, and we just don't talk about it, or we don't have the platform to discuss it. I still want to be able to, no offense, I still want to be able to intimidate my daughter's boyfriends. I don't want to be that old man that welcomes them into the house and they ain't got nothing to be afraid of, so they start treating your daughter like trash. No, I want you to come into the house and be like, is that your father? Hey, how you doing? I'm scared, but I'll have her back by 11:30. Yeah, make it 11:29, nigga. That type of thing. I still want to be that guy. I still want to be the guy that my sons look up to for guidance, and still I'm still their hero. I still kind of want to be Captain America. In my old age, even though I'm old, I'm still able to do what I need to do. Again, I'm not trying to be outside. I'm not trying to, maintain my youth. I'm not trying to get the latest Jordans and, put rims on my car, even if that's a thing, or talk in the slang that changes every 30 seconds when you're of a certain age. I'm not trying to do all that. I like being old. I like being my age. I like being in my 40s. But at the same time, I don't want to be the typical 40-year-old who, like I said, can't get around and is not as mobile and is always singing about yesteryear and things like that. Like, I still have a lot of life to live. And that's the other thing about the midlife crisis. And I think that's one of the major things that sticks with me. Who's to say that this is the middle of my life? And I get that science says that the average male lives to about, 73, 74 nowadays. I don't want that. I don't want to die in my 70s. I want to die when I'm 120. Like, I want a century on this planet, and I want a good century. I don't want to be, like I said, all ratchety and I'm on life support and I got to carry 3 bags around and I'm in a wheelchair and, I'm just barely scooting across that 100-year line. Like, yeah, I made it. I'm still alive. I don't want that. I want to be that person that's 100 years old jumping out of airplanes, and still traveling the world and telling you stories of the last time I was in Tuscany and I went to this little bistro on the side and, we got these wonderful hors d'oeuvres, when we were there. I want to be that. I want life to be that full and that vibrant. And I keep saying vibrant. It's vibrant. Either way. Might be both. I got to look it up. But I still want that type of life for myself. And I'm understanding more now what that's going to entail. So, as you can see, I'm in my car. So, what is this going to look like? I don't know. I can tell you it's going to be a lot of my opinions based on a lot of things. Just what does a 40-year-old look? What does a 40-year-old see when he looks at the world? What's his viewpoint? What affects a man at this stage in the game, you know, from relationships to traffic to current events to entertainment to my own personal struggles and endeavors, you know, to maintain my sobriety, to make sure that I'm staying in shape, to maintain my health. You know, that's one of the things that we really don't talk about. And I'm talking about mental and physical health, you know, making sure that I get, you know, my colonoscopies and making sure that I see a therapist and things of that nature, you know, but at the same time, making sure that I'm talking about the latest Marvel movie, you know, that's coming out. You know, I'm kind of excited for the Thunderbolts and the Fantastic Four to see if Marvel can turn it all around. But, you know, these are my thoughts. These are the regular things that I go through on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And, you know, this is my journey. This is in this stage of my life, this is my midlife crisis. This is what hopefully people on the outside looking in will see, that he's not in turmoil. This is not a state of distress. This is not a state of misunderstanding or confusion. This is a state of clarity. This is a moment, this is an epiphany. And it just so happens at this stage in your life when you have enough knowledge, enough intelligence, enough maturity, and enough access to some things to really affect and change your life in a way that you may not have been doing it before. That's what the midlife crisis is. So, welcome.